come here for a fucking shootout, right? A proper shootout with some proper men. Like Colonel Custer and Geronimo. Have you ever heard of them? No.
Who was Billy Hill? Billy Charles Hill was an English criminal linked to smuggling, protection rackets and extreme violence. He was one of the foremost perpetrators of organized crime in London from the 1920s to the 1960s. He was the mentor of the Krays and teach them everything about crime. He perpetrated managed cash robberies and in clever scam defrauded London high society of millions at the card tables of John Aspinall's Clermont club. Hill was born in St Pancras, London, to Amelia Jane and sympathist James Hill, who married in 1895. Growing up in an established criminal family, Hill committed his first stabbing at the age of 14. He began as a house burglar in the late 1920s and then specialized in the smashing perpetrators targeting furriers and jewelers in the 1930s. During World War II, Hill moved into the black market, specializing in foods and petrol. He also supplied forged documents for deserting servicemen and was involved in the West End protection rackets with fellow gangster Jack Spot. In the late 1940s, he was charged with burgling a warehouse, fled to South Africa, following an arrest for assault. He was extradited back to Britain. He was convicted for the warehouse robbery and served time in prison. This was the last jail term. After his release, he met Gypsy Riley, better known as Gyp Hill, who became his common-law wife. In 1952, he planned the East Kettles in Postal van robbery netting £287,000. In 1954, he organized a 40,000 billion heist. No one was ever convicted for these robberies. He also ran smuggling operations from Morocco during this period. In 1955, Hill wrote his memoir, Boss of Britain Underworld, and described his use of a shiv. Hill was mentor to the twins, Ronnie and Reggie Gray, advising them in their early criminal careers. In the late 1956, Home Secretary Glenn Lloyd George authorized the tapping of Hill's phone. At the time, gang warfare had broke out in London between Hill and usual partner in crime, Jack Spot. In 1956, Spot and his wife Rita were attacked by Hill's bodyguard Frankie Fraser, Bobby Warren and at least half a dozen other men. Both Fraser and Warren were given 7 years for the acts of violence. In the 1960s, Hill was busy fleecing aristocrats at card tables. In Douglas Thompson's book The Hustlers and subsequent documentary on Channel 4, The Real Casino Royale, the club's former final director John Burke and Hill's associate Bobby McHugh claimed that John Aspinall worked with Hill to cheat players at the Clermont club. Some of the wealthiest people in Britain were swindled out of millions of pounds, thanks to the gambling con known as the Big Edge. Marked cards could be discovered too easily, instead the low cards were slightly bent across their weight in small mangle before being repacked. High cards were slightly bent lengthwise. Hill's cards, shards, were introduced to the tables by Aspinall. They could read whatever card was, high, low or unbent. 0 card and 10 to king, thus came 60 to 40 edge. The final stage involving skimming the profits from the table to avoid attention on the first night of the operation. The tax-free winnings for the house were £14,000. According to McHugh, the 18th Earl of Derby lost £40,000 in one night. The club's former financial director John Burke quit late 1965, a year into the scam. He'd been tipped off about the investigation, but Aspinall was determined to carry on. However, Aspinall no longer had someone to deal with. The dirty end of the operation. After 2 years, Operation The Big Edge was closed. Hill respected Aspinall's decision and partnership dissolved. Hill was also involved in the property development. He bought for Chip biggest nightclub in the 10-year Richardsons, which he ran from the 1960s until the mid-1970s. Hill retired from crime in the 1970s and died on January 1, 1984, at the age of 72. His life is portrayed in the movie Once Upon a Time in London.